Hello everyone, I'm Steve Lattimore, the chair of the English Department, and I'm here to introduce our distinguished young scholars and creative writers today at our annual honors theses reading. Get a sample of each of our exceptional students' work. I want to thank friends and family for coming, as well as our esteemed students. I'll say a quick word about what the honors thesis is in the English department. So above our regular standards for the English degree, honors students must maintain a grade point average of 3.5 in English coursework completed at Webster, complete at least 2 semesters of a foreign language with a grade of B or higher in each semester, or test out of that requirement if you're already really cool at a language. Further explore cultures other than British or US in one of 4 ways. Complete a 3rd semester of a foreign language, complete an approved course in literature and translation, complete an approved course in world literature, or participate in study abroad. Students must then write an honors thesis that meets or exceeds the department's standards for exceptional work. This year, students earning honors in English are Heather Bartell, Marvin Keith, Lindsay Ohlmeyer, Jaron Rhoda, and Matthew Rogers. So today we are going to hear word from Heather, Marvin, Lindsay, and Jaron. Matthew couldn't be with us, so we will start with Heather. Where's Heather? I saw Heather. There's Heather right there. A quick word here. Heather's thesis is about womanhood, about mothers and daughters, and that vague journey that is becoming, about the coexisting roles of women and mother, and experiences with faith, friends, love, and what it means to be someone's daughter. Please welcome Heather Bartell.
Okay, hi. My mother's daughter. My mother's bedroom was always one of my favorite rooms in the house. In the big drawer at the bottom of her wide wooden dresser, she kept the clothes she didn't wear or that didn't fit her anymore. Mostly it was nightwear, loungewear, there was even some lingerie. There was a blue silk robe I was particularly fond of. I'd wear it over my clothes and put up my hair with one of my mother's big hair clips, and sometimes dab on a bit of her perfume, Obsession by Calvin Klein. I felt sophisticated. I'd wear my mother's blue silk robe and dance in the kitchen to Shania Twain, swaying my hips and rolling my shoulders as I spun around, watching my reflection in the dishwasher. I used to sit on the edge of the bathtub while my mother got ready for work, breathing in the smell of her eyeshadow and hairspray, studying the way she held her mouth in an O shape as she lined her eyes. It was on one of these mornings I saw her tattoo for the first time, a sun setting over the ocean on the small of her back, and couldn't believe she hadn't told me about it. She just laughed. When she got dressed, my mother let me pick out her outfits, and I always chose the same few shirts because they were my favorites. I'm not sure if she wore them the most because they were my favorites, or if they were my favorites because she wore them the most. Now I think we were both seeking each other's approval. On Saturday mornings, I used to go with my mother to the salon where she worked. I folded faded blue and white towels still warm from the dryer and swept up the hair left behind on the floor of her station. At the end of the day, she gave me a few dollars from all of the tips she received. During the lulls when she didn't have any clients, I would sit in the chair at her station in front of the mirror. She would drape a white plastic cape over my shoulders and trim my bangs, her fingers right in front of my face but not touching. Sometimes she gave me highlights or styled my hair with big round curls. She always told me if I kept moving so much, she was going to cut off my ear by accident. I used to watch my mother in the mirror as she maneuvered around the chair, her back bent over, eyes focused on what she was doing. She was the fun mom. At night, in the basement, she would dance to John Mellencamp. I'd giggle as she held my hands and spun me around the room, singing along to Jack and Diane and Hurt So Good. In the car, she sang along to Tanya Tucker and Linda Ronstadt, and as a kid, I knew all of the words to Two Sparrows in a Hurricane and When Will I Be Loved. I used to sneak into my parents' room in the middle of the night when I had a bad dream. I always crept up to my mother's side, squeezing into the space next to her at the edge of the bed, burying my head in her pillow. Some nights she let me stay. Another night she carried me back to my own bed, where she tucked me in and then yelled at the monsters I thought were in my closet to go away. I used to fall asleep on my side, facing the wall with my mother next to me, and still feel the weight of her body in my bed even after she left my room. One of my favorite pastimes was sifting through the contents of the drawer beneath my mother's side of the bed. Everything in there seemed to belong to another woman, the woman who wore the blue silk robe. I used to sit on her bedroom floor and read her old diary entries from the year she met my dad. I was surprised by some of the things she had written. Who was the bitch from hell? Once I found a note from her high school boyfriend who had written TNT in the corner of the page. 2 nifty tits. I looked at her old photographs, and I was never too careful about putting things back in the same place. Maybe there was a part of me that wanted my snooping to be discovered. I used to look through her purse for gum or candy, but I stopped when I found a pack of cigarettes. It's June, and my mother is sitting on the hot pink chair shaped like a giant high-heeled shoe that I've pulled to the center of my bedroom. She is my audience. After spending the summer afternoon in my room choreographing, I want to show her a dance. I'm feeling goofy and don't notice the serious look on her face as I prance around in front of her. When I finish my dance, she applauds, and then she says she has something to tell me. I place one hand on my hip and tap my chin with the other, acting as though I'm thinking. I know it must be something big. After a moment, I hold a finger in the air and open my eyes wide. You're pregnant, I guess. She shakes her head. What, are you and Dad getting divorced? This feels absurd too. Something I can't imagine ever happening, just like my mother having another child. And I say it jokingly, but as soon as I see the way she's looking at me, I know it's true. I'm screaming. I don't know what to do other than scream at her. I want her out of my room, out of my chair shaped like a giant high-heeled shoe. I want her to take it back. When she tries to hug me, I push her away. She stands in front of me, trying to calm me down, and behind her I see my dad and little brother Landon come into the room. They're both crying. I run to my dad and let him pull me into an embrace. All 4 of us crowd onto my twin-sized bed and hold each other for what feels like hours. I stay curled up next to my dad, preferring the smell of his t-shirt to the scent of my mother's perfume. Outside the open window, I can hear the sounds of summer, the twitter of birds calling back and forth, an airplane soaring by overhead, the growl of a lawnmower in the distance as the day stretches on. When I wake up the next morning, my mother's pillow is on the couch. Landon and I helped her move out later that day. My mother grew up in a small Missouri farm town with a population just over 1,000. Her father was a farmer and her mother a homemaker. My mother is the youngest of 4, and growing up, she shared a bedroom with her 2 older sisters. It had orange shag carpeting that she always hated. My mother was actively involved in 4-H as a kid and raised a cow named Romeo and cried when he was sold for slaughtering. She was a sleepwalker, and once, in her sleep, she walked out the back door of the house and woke up on the front porch, confused and frightened, banging on the door to be let back inside. When she was 2, my mother was bitten between the eyes by the family dog. Its name was Happy. When she was 4, she walked into a fire where my grandmother had been burning weeds and scorched her favorite red tennis shoes. The same year, she and her mother were both trampled by cows on the far edge of their farm. Somehow, she wasn't injured. My mother was raised Catholic. Both of her parents were Catholic. Her mother, the oldest of 14, and her father somewhere in the middle of 8. If both sides of the family are combined, my mother has a total of 91 first cousins. As a teenager, she earned money by babysitting, and she sewed her own prom dress. She played the flute in the marching band and acted in school plays. She played volleyball. My mother graduated high school with a class of 32 students. She had bright blonde hair and big tits that she probably thought her daughter would inherit. She had a boyfriend who joined the Navy, and she still has his dog tags. She had dreams of getting out of her dumpy small town. And so when she turned 18, that's what she did. She traded the farm chores for cosmetology school in Columbia, Missouri, the orange shag carpeting for a basement apartment. By the time she was 23, my mother was working full-time at a salon in Columbia called the Captain's Quarters. This is how she met my father, on a blind date set up by one of her clients. They were married 2 years later in the Catholic Church, even though my father hadn't yet officially converted. She wore a wedding dress she didn't like very much because it was the one her mother wanted her to wear: white, long-sleeved, lace bodice, a heavy train that flowers up behind her in all the photographs. After their honeymoon, my parents moved into a house with a fireplace in the living room and a peach tree in the backyard. A month before their first wedding anniversary, my mother became my mother. In my mother's family, being a mother also meant being a wife. It must have been hard for her to leave my father, and years later I realized how brave she was to do so, how bold. It went against all the values with which she'd been raised. It went against everything her family believed in. On the night before her mother's funeral, my mother and I laid in hotel beds parallel to one another, and she told me she always wondered if her parents had truly loved each other. She told me about all of the times her parents used to fight and wondered if her father had always been faithful. It was easy to wonder how long it would take before he found another woman to take care of him. My mother's mother might have been unhappy, but as an old-fashioned Catholic woman, she never would have left her husband. My mother was the first to choose that option. My mother was the first to choose to leave. The duplex my mother moved into after she left my father had 2 bedrooms. Suddenly, I had 2 bedrooms, the familiar one at my dad's I'd occupied for years, and the one at the duplex I shared with Landon. We had our own room, but that first night, the 3 of us slept in my mother's new bedroom on air mattresses. And even though I had a bed and a space of my own, that was where I stayed. She bought a queen-size bed that took up most of the room, and for most of the 2 years my mother lived in the duplex, I slept in her bed. It's typical for divorce to be classified as something no one had seen coming. At age 11, I certainly hadn't been anticipating my parents' divorce. I hadn't been expecting to live a life made up of shifts, to have my weeks divided between the 2 of them, one night a week with my mother, the rest with my dad, each weekend alternating. My parents had always seemed happy, and they probably had been, but now they lived in 2 separate houses. I lived in 2 separate houses, but considered every moment at my mother's temporary. I hardly kept any clothes there, packing a bag each time I went, and kept very few items in the room Landon and I shared. It was hard for me to consider the bits and pieces of myself at her duplex, the collages made from teen magazines taped to the walls, the pink microbead pillow in the shape of a pig, the stack of DVDs, as things that belonged to my real life. 5 months after my mother moved into the duplex, I met her new boyfriend on New Year's Eve. I had just learned about him the day before when my father told me that his name was Jim, that his son was one of my classmates, and that my mother had been seeing him for a while. It was never said until much later, but even at age 11, all I could think was that this man named Jim was somehow the reason my parents were no longer together. She was somehow the reason. That night, Jim came into my mother's apartment carrying a vase of red roses and wearing a denim shirt and a mustache. He gave the flowers to my mother and then turned to me. "It's nice to meet you," he said. "I'm Jim." "I'm Heather," I said, unsure of what else to say. He laughed in the way people laugh sometimes without really even smiling. "Yeah, I know that," he said. Jim asked me how my dance classes were going, and I didn't want to answer because he wasn't supposed to know that I danced. He wasn't supposed to know anything about me when I knew nothing about him. Why did he know who I was, when to me, he was a total stranger? Jim's son Chris was there too. We had been friends a long time ago. In 1st grade, when he broke his arm and had to stay inside for recess, I was the person he asked to stay inside with him. We played with Beanie Babies together. Chris wasn't a total stranger, but he was never someone I had expected to know under these strange circumstances. For most of the night, my mother, Jim, and the rest of her friends who had come over stayed downstairs and played cards while all of the kids went up to the bedroom Landon and I shared. We tried to play charades for a while, but I had more important things on my mind. "Do you know how long my mom and your dad have been dating?" I asked Chris. We were all sitting in a circle on the carpet between the 2 beds, slips of paper from our games scattered around us. Chris made a face. "She's been coming over for a long time," he said. "She spends the night a lot, and sometimes I hear noises coming from my dad's bedroom after I've gone to bed. You don't even want to know what kind of noises." How long has she been coming over? I don't know, Chris said. Since August. As Chris filled me in on all of the nights my mother spent at Jim's house, nights I hadn't known about until this one, I made a mental timeline. My mother had moved out in June and started spending the night with Jim in August. And Chris had known about the relationship, but Landon and I hadn't. It didn't make sense. At the time, it didn't make sense. Although now I'm certain my mother was trying to protect us. Still, now, when I think about my parents' marriage before that summer, I can't help but place tension on some of my memories. Was there something more behind my dad's willingness to drive us around the neighborhood looking for my mother one summer night when she hadn't yet come back from a walk? Were there jabs at each other, the friendly kind born out of love, or had they been attacks? What was it I heard my mother mumble through tears when I couldn't sleep and cracked open the door to their bedroom one night? I don't even want the kids anymore. Had that really been what she said? Or is that just what I heard? What was she going through that I didn't know about? When I went back downstairs, my mother was sitting at the kitchen table next to Jim, laughing. She had been drinking and her eyes were shining and happy. At midnight, she poured champagne and gave everyone confetti poppers. There were toasts and cheers and bursts of color filling the small space where my mother now belonged. I sat in a chair at the kitchen table and brought in the new year watching Jim and my mother kiss. The next day, my mother asked Landon and me what we thought about Jim. I told her I didn't like him. Well, you should probably try to get used to him, she said. You're going to be seeing a lot more of him and Chris. I convinced Landon to go outside with me. We liked to ride around our mother's neighborhood, Landon on his bicycle and myself on a scooter. There was a large hill past the empty lot next to her apartment we liked to coast down. When we reached the bottom, we stayed there, circling each other. Don't you want to go home? I asked my brother. We just got here, he said. No, I mean home, with Dad.
That's really moving. A little kiss her right here. I'm proud of that. I'm gonna let that swing. So we have the tension the whole time of when's it gonna come down. Next, we're gonna hear from Marvin Heath. Marvin is going to share with us from his unique thesis that I understand is half poetry, half nonfiction. Marvin's professors note that he has made enormous strides as both a writer and a student of literature in his time here at Webster, and we are happy to share his work, and I'm very interested to hear this half nonfiction, half poetry.
Hi guys. So I'm actually only going to do 3 poems from the end because it's really long and I don't have time to do it all. So first one is February 26th, the night my girlfriend's dad committed suicide. I left my job early when I got her call, even though she insisted she was fine, repeating, "It's beyond me to mourn for someone I never knew." I'd seen her capacity for love, those repetitive readings of Catcher in the Rye, where she sobbed on the futon in the den whenever Holden breaks the Little Shirley Beans record. I picked up 8 bottles of cheap Pinot from Aldi and made sure to refill her glass brimful whenever it got half empty, and relight the candle wicks whenever the wax became too much and they drowned. Although she didn't cry, her voice sounded hollow when she asked, "Why do people do it?" The words whittled down and soft. I couldn't think of an answer. So instead, I put on a Damien Rice record, humming Cold Water, as I smoothed the hair behind her ears. Once the music stopped, I lifted out the record, replacing the slow grind of the needle with silence. After leaving church. My mother hugged the steering wheel, the sunlight haloing her stark black hair, as I watched the city skyline reduce into the horizon behind us. Recently, she'd begun rereading The Purpose-Driven Life, using her Cutco kitchen scissors to precisely trim around her favorite passages, which she used as bookmarks in her Bible. I watched her slender ringed fingers tap the rhythm to "We've Only Just Begun" on the steering wheel. "You know, I really do need to get my wheels aligned," she said in the voice I'd come to associate with the quiet, passionate way she sang church hymnals to herself when cleaning the house. "Mom, I want you to leave him. Leave Dad." The bags under her eyes, the way she looked like a shriveled, half-real version of the woman I'd known my whole life, was the result, I knew, of a man who was always here and there and as far from her as possible. "See how the car veers when I let off the steering wheel?" In the 11 months since I'd shown her a used condom wrapper and a pair of turquoise lace panties I'd found under the passenger seat of my father's truck, she'd given me this long, quivering look and asked, "Why'd you do this to me? It's easier. The not knowing is so much easier." She'd stopped cooking homemade dinners, buying healthy Whole Foods hot bar meals instead, joined the local curves and shed a full person, her clothes now formlessly hanging on a body which looked too fragile to hug. "It's a problem, Mom. Don't worry, honey, I'll go get an alignment tomorrow," she replied. "I want to leave and never come back, but I can't, not with you here." She grabbed the McDonald's napkin from the glove box, dabbing at her mauve mascara. When we got home, I stood in the doorway to her room as she packed a small leather duffel bag, my father's underwear and socks strewn furiously over the bed and floor, which she zipped up and placed near the front door. Minutes later, she retrieved it and began unpacking her clothes, a ritual I'd seen periodically throughout my life. I once asked why. She always packed her bag only to unpack it before he got home. She replied that packing made her think of all the good reasons to stay, the things she'd miss if she left. The legacies. Inside the Collier's home, police found 3 revolvers, a bayonet, and a saber, a half-dozen toy trains, toy tops, 14 pianos, bugles, an accordion, a banjo, tin cans, lenses and tripods, bicycle lamps, a rolled-up 100-foot rug runner, a 9-foot-tall mahogany clock with a music box inside, and pastel-painted figures on the face. 13 ornate mantel clocks, including one contained in a metal bust of a girl whose ears and bodice dripped in coins. Heavily ornate Victorian oil lamps and vases, white plaster portrait busts and picture frames. 5 violins and scores of 7-inch gramophone records dating from 1898, including round her neck she wears a yellow ribbon for her lover who is fur away. 1. What the French did with skull bones and ulna, in the dark, moist catacombs of Paris, the Collier brothers stripped down to an art, constructing for themselves a network of tunnels through bric-a-brac and garbage. Belly flat on the floor, siphoning through baby bottle nipples and rusted bicycle pedals, with one side of a grimed-up arm, Langley pulled himself through mound after mound of trash, back toward his brother, the sole thought on his mind, the need to feed Homer with the hemorrhaged eyes, his daily dose of 15 oranges. The dirty pulp under his fingernails and the constant tang of citrus, he did what he had to do, stacking each day's newspaper beside his brother for when his vision decided to return. 2. When my mom decided that a collective effort was necessary to clear out the clutter my grandmother had spent over 3 decades of her life constructing into stalagmite-like columns, cramped pathways flattened down by years of cautious feet zigzagging around the stacks of trash throughout her house, I chuckled. Well, I don't find it funny. Your grandmother hasn't slept on more than a fraction of her bed in years. I remembered back to our post-church routine while watching Survivor. I remembered back to your post-church routine every Wednesday night, lying in the garbage that covered her bed while watching Survivor, using commercial breaks as opportunities to find hidden objects in her lookalike's calendar. 3. I asked Grandmama where I can find her collection of Bessie Smith records, the ones still in their sleeves that I used to trace the waxy lines of when I was a kid. One of the rooms in the house, she says, watering her ficus and Boston fern. So helpful. I look it up on my phone, Langley's favorite. Nobody in town can bake a sweet jelly roll like mine. Smith's voice like the well-polished horn of a phonograph. Somebody told me I made the best jelly roll in town. I say in town. 4. Imagine an avalanche of all the things you never knew could actually cause you harm, crushing your lungs. Now imagine Langley, his beard like Jesus's in the picture he used as a coffee table, propped up on stacks of encyclopedias and phone books, crawling through man-made tunnels the size of kiddie play place tubes, rolling oranges with his nose toward the side of the house where Homer scratches at sores he can't see. Coming, buddy, I'm coming. Don't you worry. 5. The police regarded the deaths as an accident. When they found Langley all dry, bones and tattered plaid, smothered by his own collection of stuffs. He triggered the very system, the trip wires and mouse traps he designed to keep intruders out. The bundles of newspapers he meticulously arranged to fall on trespassers, crushing him instead. And Homer, starvation, having whittled him down to nothing, still waiting, always waiting for his brother to return with the day's yield of oranges. 6. I don't tell Grandmama about the Colliers when I find Ziggy's corpse. The cat we decided years ago had up and decided to seek out a better life, buried under a room full of nicotine-stained McDonald's Happy Meal toys still in their wrappers. My mother gets emotional about excess ever since she started TiVoing reruns of Hoarders Buried Alive. "Oh, Mom," I hear her say in the living room, "why do you need all this junk?" I've learned never to refer to a hoarder's possessions as junk. Oh, shove it up your ass. I can't wait to die in this junk. I can hear my mother revving up, reminding me of how fire engines first sound when the switch gets flipped. That slow crescendo, how they're never as loud at first as they are after. 7. The hoarders on television always end up crying, as if they don't want this life for themselves anymore. But really it's just because their secret's out, blasted over the air and into the homes of American voyeurs, my mom being one of them, vacuuming during commercial breaks to make sure the gene link between herself and her mother doesn't go any further down the family tree. It really is so sad, she says, looking to me for agreement. I shrug. On TV, the cleanup crew pries furry carcasses off a hardwood floor with paint scrapers and tosses them into black trash bags. 8. When Homer first lost his sight, he used to see visions of beautiful buildings, always in red. He would describe them to me and I would try to paint them just as he directed. Someday when Homer regains his sight, I will show those paintings to him. Look, Langley and Homer didn't need intervention. And when I'm at Grandmama's, I find it hard to believe that anyone can sift through another person's stuff and decide what's suitable to keep and what goes in boxes to Goodwill. It's what we're all trying to do. Construct something so our lives seem like much more than the 9 to 5 pick up the kids from soccer practice, then cook dinner and get tipsy off 3 glasses of wine routines everyone gets smothered by. 9. I want to imagine Langley singing as he died, making Bessie's words his last. No other one in town can bake a sweet jelly roll so fine, so fine. Coming, buddy, I'm coming. Don't you worry.
The Collier brothers. Every once in a while a recorded Lenny Bruce performance. Lenny Bruce makes a reference to the Collier brothers in the audience. Cheep, 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 crickets, nothing. And you can hear like this palpable disappointment. And now, 50-something years later, Marvin's down on the Collier brothers. That's so great. I hope that's something that we do here at Webster. I hope we encourage our students to go for what you're interested in, explore what you're interested in, and not worry so much about, to be or not to be, which is a good place to introduce Lindsay Ohlmeyer, who's going to read from our thesis that focuses on Maria Edgeworth's novel, The Absentee, which revolves around the unique subject of Irish absentee landlords and is set in England and Ireland. In the paper, Lindsay examines national identity and how various characters choose their own identity and that of others. Lindsay?
What signifies what accent people speak in, national identity, and Maria Edgeworth's The Absentee. After Columbro's trip to Ireland and triumphant plan to right his absentee parents' wrongs, characters express strong sentiments about the future. Lady Clonbrony's reaction to Columbro's decision is undeniably the most poignant. Although she spends the majority of the novel desperately chasing London women and acceptance into English society, her change of heart becomes apparent in one declaration. These sort of people are really very cold and have, I do believe, no hearts. I don't verily think there is one of them would regret me more. Hey, let me see Dublin, the winter Marion Square, new furnished, and the summer, Clonbrony Castle. Rather than resigning herself to follow the men back to Ireland, Lady Clonbrony truly wishes to return. This moment of clarity underscores the change that takes place within her persona. In addition to this clear transformation, the reader also sees aspects of Lady Clonbrony's personality that had been buried since before the novel's beginning. She thinks back to life in Ireland and expresses trepidation at returning. I thought all in Ireland must have forgotten me. It is now so long since I was at home. Lady Clonbrony's concern noticeably shifts from the opinions of the London women to those of her former Irish friends. The fear that those in Ireland have forgotten her gives the reader insight into Lady Clonbrony's personality before her transition in England. Moreover, she has clearly abandoned her English affectation. The women who previously clung to her Oxfordshire birth ultimately refer to Ireland as home. The extremes between which Lady Clonbrony vacillates reinforce the idea of a fluidity in determining national identity, and her ultimate decision to reclaim Irish nationality emphasizes the possibility of culturally belonging to a country other than one's birthplace. Lady Clonbrony is not the only female character harboring affection for Ireland. Edgeworth describes Grace's reaction to her aunt's confession. "Oh, return, let us return home," cried Miss Nugent, with a voice of great emotion. "Return, let us return home." Like Lady Clonbrony, Grace is a woman who was not born in Ireland but spent an extended period of time living there and absorbing aspects of the culture. It is worthwhile to note the nature of the women's reactions. Grace and Lady Clonbrony passionately long to return, emphasizing the personal desires to reconnect with the country. The women struggle with their identities throughout the novel, but at the end both associate Ireland with the idea of home. While Lady Clonbrony insists upon living in London as an absentee for much of the narrative, her husband Lord Clonbrony does not willingly adjust to the transition. Lady Clonbrony gladly mingles with high society, albeit sometimes unknowingly as a source of amusement for the London ladies, but Lord Clonbrony chooses to move in an opposite direction on the social ladder. Lord Clonbrony, since he left Ireland, had become less of a gentleman, who was a great person in Dublin, found himself nobody in England, a mere cipher in London. Unlike Lady Clonbrony, Lord Clonbrony does not attempt to appear more educated or refined. Lord Clonbrony clings to his Irish identity and actually descends the social ladder in the foreign, more complex English culture. Interestingly, Lord and Lady Clonbrony do share a similar sense of assimilation to London society in that they both change their personas in order to achieve a desired reaction. Lady Clonbrony craves acceptance by the elite, and in doing so betrays her Irish connections. Lord Clonbrony, however, rejects his wife's society in favor of an entirely different sort of companions. He retreated from them altogether and sought entertainment and self-complacency in society beneath him, indeed, both in rank and education, but in which he had the satisfaction of feeling himself the first in company. Lady Clonbrony's shifting exterior character leads her to become the lowest and most pitiable of a higher social class. Her efforts to shun her Irish connections result in a mere caricature of an Englishwoman. Moreover, Lord Clonbrony's deliberate selection of lower classes allows him to retain the sense of control over his situation, whereas his wife's vain character provides others with reasons to ridicule her. Lord Clonbrony embraces his culture and creates his own environment by surrounding himself with countrymen and Englishmen whose professions place them beneath the level even of an Irish immigrant. Lord Clonbrony's association with the lower social class provides both him and Colombre with the opportunity to meet characters such as fellow Irishman Terence O'Fay. Lady Clonbrony despises O'Fay for his boisterous comportment and blatantly Irish tendencies, which serve as reminders of the lifestyle from which she attempts to escape. Lord Clonbrony directly addresses the disparity between his interactions and those of his wife when, joined by Colombre, they discuss O'Fay. "He diverts me," said Lord Clonbrony, "while many of your correct-mannered fine ladies or gentlemen put me to shame. What signifies what accent people speak in that have nothing to say, hey Colombre?" Lord Clonbrony appreciates O'Fay's openness regarding his heritage and is reassured by the link to his home. The patriarch does not only attempt to justify his connection to O'Fay, he also hints at the issue of accent and language, which represents Lady Clonbrony's failure to completely enter into London high society. Early in the novel, Edgeworth introduces several Irishmen living and working in London. These men are not absentees, but earn a meager living as laborers. While visiting the coachmaker, Colombre encounters one such expatriate and experiences a cultural encounter. Patty, parting with an untasted bit of tobacco, began and recounted some of Sir Terence O'Fay's exploits in invading duns, reclevying cattle, fighting sheriffs, riding subs, managing camps, tricking custodies, in language so strange, and with a countenance and gestures so full of enjoyment of the jest, that Lord Colombre could not help laughing, partly at and partly with his countrymen. All the yard were in a roar of laughter, though they did not understand half of what they heard, but their risible muscles were acted upon mechanically or maliciously merely by the sound of the Irish brogue. Edgeworth's character Patty practices a centuries-old Irish tradition of storytelling, and while the validity of Terence's alleged adventures cannot be confirmed, the references, particularly to cattle, are reminiscent of earlier oral and literary customs such as the Tambocolia. The reaction of the audience is also important in understanding feelings toward the Irish. The men in the coachyard are unlike the group of women gossiping about Colombre and Lord Clonbrony. Colombre joins them in laughing, and it is important to note that none of them are explicitly stated as identifying with or standing in opposition to Patty. In this particular example, the fact that ambiguity surrounds the men's motivation for laughing gives a stronger social commentary than if Edgeworth were to give them a solid stance. When the reader first encounters Colombre, it is through the eyes of the fashionable Englishwomen gossiping about Lady Clonbrony in front of the opera house. The women admire him from a distance without knowing his relation to Lady Clonbrony. As the others comment on his physical appearance, Mrs. Darville remarks, "Not an Irishman, I'm sure, by his manner." Ironically, Colombre is not only an Irishman by birth, but also the son of a woman whose failed attempts to integrate into English society occupy a great deal of the women's gossip. This flippant comment about his appearance and its cultural implications reveals the depth to which anti-Irish prejudices have permeated the mindset of this particular group of English women. For Colombre, nationality and identity are not merely defined by assessing his birthplace versus his upbringing. He must consider all aspects of the cultures and locations to which he has been exposed, and his position as the protagonist leads much of the novel to acknowledge this inner conflict. Colombre is both advantaged and disadvantaged by the fact that he has received the best that the two countries have to offer. He had formed friendships in England. He was fully sensible of the superior comforts, refinement, and information of English society, but his own country was endeared to him by early association, and a sense of duty and patriotism was endeared to him by early association, and a sense of duty and patriotism attached him to Ireland. And shall I too be an absentee? Was a question which resulted from these reflections, a question which he was not yet prepared to answer decidedly. The Clonbronis ensure that Colombre experiences a thoroughly English upbringing, but his birth and own personal experiences tie him to Ireland in an unbreakable bond.
Constant exposure to the culture clash that occurs between his parents causes Colombre to experience an internal struggle for identity in an abstract sense, but also in more practical manners. He must decide how to approach Ireland and absenteeism for himself, but with the staunchly opposed viewpoints of his parents, he cannot come to a solid conclusion. Therefore, he must make a pilgrimage back to his birthplace to personally observe the culture and citizens whose lives depend on this decision. As the novel's protagonist and someone influenced strongly by both English and Irish culture, Colombre occupies a unique position. He does not share his parents' accent, which serves as substantial proof of Irishness to the English men and women he encounters while in London. Likewise, he cannot fully sympathize with either of his parents' particular situations regarding nationality. Colombre can, however, relate to his father on the shared points of being male and having been born in Ireland. When the two speak, it is with a sense of camaraderie that Colombre never experiences in talks with his mother. For example, while discussing troubling matters regarding the family's business affairs, Lord Clonbrony talks honestly with Colombre. But it is all my Lady Clonbrony's nonsense. If people would but, as they ought, stay in their own country, live on their own estates, and kill their own mutton, money need never be wanting. Lord Clonbrony makes no efforts to hide his nationalist tendencies, and expresses opinions about a simpler way of life that he cannot obtain living as an absentee in England. Thus, through his father, Colombre is exposed to sentiments in favor of returning to Ireland that equal his mother's insistence of avoiding the nation. While Lord Clonbrony represents staunch nationalism based on birth and upbringing, Colombre's mixed opinions allow him to serve as a more neutral character with which the reader can sympathize. Colombre considers his father's comments from the earlier passage and filters them through his English-educated powers of reasoning, only to come to the same conclusion. For killing their own mutton, Lord Colombre did not see the indispensable necessity, but he rejoiced to hear his father assert that people should reside in their own country. Colombre makes his deductions differently than his father, focusing more on larger ideas of nationalism and less on specific examples based on experiences living in Ireland. This reflects the vast divide between the Irishmen, created in part by time periods, location of maturation, and access to education. Although he was in fact born in Ireland, Colombre's decision to agree with pro-Irish views despite Irish upbringing and education gives greater measures of credibility to the idea of opposing absenteeism. In contrast to his parents, Colombre presents a more sympathetic view of Ireland that is strongly consistent with the ideals triumph throughout the novel. When his mother declares that she cannot understand his affinity for Ireland and planned voyage there, he replies, "Not merely because it is my native country, but I wish to go thither. I desire to become acquainted with it, because it is the country in which my father's property lies, and from which we draw our subsistence." Colombre's reasons for returning to his birthplace are not solely sentimental, but also directly opposed to the absentee mindset that his parents have adopted. Neither explanation satisfies Lady Clonbrony, who is so entrenched in living as an absentee and rejecting Ireland that she can only view returning as an alien concept. As Lord Clonbrony's discussions turn increasingly anti-English and suspicious of Lady Clonbrony's influence on the young man, Colombre acknowledges both his English influences and Irish heritage. Before visiting Ireland, Colombre voices his support for his home country. "I assure you, I am as warm a friend to Ireland as your heart could wish. You will have no reason, in that respect, at least, nor, I hope in any other, to curse my English education." Colombre serves as a mediator between the passionately opposed stances of his parents. His responses are calculated to respect his vested interests in both countries and cultures. Moreover, his refusal to side entirely with one parent over the other reflects the possibility of claiming dual identities, thus setting him apart from the more stereotypical English and Irish characters encountered throughout the novel.
Thank you. So we conclude today with the dramatic reading, correct? From Giannarota's extraordinary Great Pretender, A Lavender Play, which I'm not even going to try to describe or explain. Instead, let Jaren set this up for us. Okay.
Hi everyone. Just a brief synopsis about Great Pretender. It's a 60-page play, so it's just under full length. The play is set in the 1950s in Washington, D.C., and is during the Red Scare, the time where people were very fearful of communism. And much of the play concerns like true historical aspects of it, in which other groups were also being persecuted, not just the communists within the State Department, namely those who identified as lesbian or gay. And so the action of this play kind of deals with that. The main character here is named Dan, who's a member of the State Department, and he and his wife are posing as a homosexual couple because there were couples of convenience that were put together between homosexual men and homosexual women. As he's working for the State Department, he's kind of working as a double agent in that way, and that will hopefully become a little more clear through some of the information and through the action that we'll see. So these are the first two scenes of the play. And these are my readers, Sean Pierce, Maggie Hake, Jimmy Stevens, and Marissa Dekoff, who will be reading as the characters as we go along. So, all right. Scene 1, darkness. The sounds of static, as if someone were turning a dial on a radio. During the sounds of static, we see the following projection appear. Lavender marriages were marriages of convenience between a homosexual man and woman, often friends or acquaintances, for practical purposes of avoiding scandal or public scrutiny. Also projected are photos, signs for Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. We can hear music coming through, The Platters' Great Pretender. Lights up. Roger and Jane's living room. Great Pretender continues to play on the radio. When the song finishes, music continues playing. Wanted by Perry Como, perhaps. Roger is laughing. Dan and Billy are seated.
Let's just be glad there weren't any cops around.
Yeah, definitely.
I told Dan that it might be worth waiting a few days before, going out to the square, see if it's dangerous or not.
He was fine.
You know me, Mill. I always love a little adventure.
On the rocks, Raj?
Yes.
Are you two sure you don't want a cocktail?
2 lemonades is fine, Jane dear.
We don't drink much.
You found the wrong set of friends then. So, you heard of Lafayette Square out in, what's it again?
Oregon.
Yeah. How's DC looking out there? Are we getting a pretty bad rap?
If you read the papers.
But who can trust those anymore?
Ain't that the truth?
So did you two meet at work then, or was it that night out in the park?
Oh, no, it was at work. You don't really meet guys out much when you're cruising. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of talking.
Yes, I see.
Ain't that right, Jane?
Just ignore everything he says. He's like a monkey with a suit on.
You're a handsome little monkey.
See what I have to put up with?
But he's recognized me from the park, at work.
While he was taking a piss, no less.
Asked me if I was in town, and we got to talking, and
now you're here.
Roger's been very helpful, telling me some of the best spots around the city.
Oh, he's shown you around town already? Simmer down, boy.
Well, no, not yet.
We could all go out and get a drink sometime if you'd like. I've got some money I've put into this really nifty bar, juke joint over a few blocks.
Sounds fun.
Well, I don't drink much.
Suit yourself. Maybe I'll show Danny Boy here a good time instead.
Well, don't worry, hon. We can have some girl talk here at the house. I've got a great new casserole that I got from Huggins at the last Mattachine meeting.
Huggins? That old fruitbat cooks?
You'd be surprised what sort of hobbies people can have besides drinking. He's good. He could even show you how a kitchen works.
Why do I have to cook when you can do it so well?
Oh, shove it, you louse. Hey, let's toast to new neighbors and new friends.
Toast. So, why come to the State Department all the way out from Oregon? What were you doing out there?
Oh, a little this, a little that.
My father passed away recently.
Oh.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
It's alright, but there wasn't really anything keeping us tied down to Oregon. My old man, he had ties there at the Capitol and was trying to set something up for me. The security department.
Well, watch your back with those fuckers. They're the ones who will can you good if you're being too queer.
Roger, don't scare me.
I'm just giving them fair warning is all.
Dan and I always wanted to travel. He grew up there.
Oh, really?
Salem Community High School grad.
Washington, D.C. seems so much friendlier, so...
Let me guess. Theater. Marching band.
Boxing.
Oh, Mr. Boxing Champion.
I was hardly...
Nonsense. You're a rare gem among us. A homo athlete. Good for you.
He still practices.
Yeah.
He won't say so, but he is quite good.
Of course he is.
Yes, and we're glad to be here. Oregon was so much chillier.
Oh, sure. DC is closer to the heart of things.
We hardly even knew about other lavender couples until we came here.
And you hadn't heard of Mattachine while you were out in Oregon?
No, we were in,
The neighborhood there was far more conservative. It was harder to, find others to talk to about,
harder to find other lavenders like you two.
yes.
I see. Must not have been a very pleasant neighborhood.
No.
Nope. We were just glad to find friends right away, weren't we, Dan?
Yes, and I was ready to leave because I just recently split up with Bill.
Oh, what a shame.
Yes, with Bill, and I never really had much of a... And so here we are.
And we're glad. I'll show you all the best spots in town, trust me.
When you're not planning the next Mattachine meeting with me, right, Raj? You said you'd help this month.
Well, we'd be glad to help with you too, wouldn't we, Bill?
Well, yes, I suppose so.
Good. I want something big, a protest of some kind. But Huggins doesn't want to have it. We could always use more members that aren't afraid of being vocal. That wouldn't bother either of you, would it?
No, not us, right, Bill?
No.
Well, grand.
Grand.
Everyone takes a drink. Lights fade. Scene 2. A new projection. In 1954, R.W. Scott McLeod, head of Security and Consular Affairs, started the Miscellaneous M Unit, a special investigative branch within the State Department. We hear the sounds of a reporter. While he is speaking, lights come up on a split scene. Jane and Roger's living room. They're cleaning up from the previous scene. Millie and Dan's living room, which is empty. The reporter. Concerning the allegations against them. Not only is the State Department cracking down on communists and others suspected of treason, but also on those of a strange sexual perversion. The Department of Security and Consular Affairs assures us that swift and immediate action is being taken to infiltrate and investigate allegations against various State Department employees in order to ensure the integrity and protection of our government employees. Appropriate measures have been taken for several hundred employees over the past 2 years.
I'm just being honest with you.
Well, what did you expect from me, Daniel? I'm not an expert at this sort of thing.
I'm telling you what I saw so we can do better next time.
There's not going to be a next time, dear. Not for me.
Mill.
I'm serious.
Honey, I know it's hard, but we both have to pretend for a little bit. Remember how you said you wanted that adventure back in California? Well, we got our adventure.
Adventure? Going to Bermuda, that's an adventure. Seeing the world's biggest waterfall.
Okay, it's not what you wanted.
Who wants this, Dan? Who? Not even the most right-wing, spineless, well, you know.
Sure, no one wants to do it, but someone has to.
You don't have to.
Yes, I do. It's vicious insecurity, Mill. You have no idea what it's like. If they have any suspicion about another guy, a rumor, for God's sake.
Dan.
Sorry, for goodness sake. They're merciless. Turning down the offer to work at McLeod would be like saying I'm one of them. It doesn't matter how clean your record is.
But you haven't done anything. They know that.
I could be considered guilty by association. At that point, I might as well resign before they call me in for one of their interrogations.
They call you in?
It's pretty serious.
I'm sure someone could.
They're all afraid, and I don't blame them.
So why don't we leave?
Leave?
Yes, we could pack up. You could find another job somewhere. We could move again.
I'm tired of moving around, Millie. If I do this, we can stay in one place from now on, instead of having to relocate every time I get a new assignment. I promise it's going to be worth it in the long run, sweetie.
I just don't like this business. I don't like it one bit. I hate sneaking around and lying and pretending to be someone that we're not.
I know, Mill.
And I hate this whole mysterious M unit or whatever it is. I just want this to be over with and I want you to be safe. I can't handle it anymore.
It's okay, sweetie.
And who in the world is Bill?
Bill. Oh.
You could have at least told me you were pretending to have a lover beforehand instead of springing it on me like that.
Bill was my college boxing buddy. See, this isn't so bad.
Please, do what you need to do, as soon as possible, right?
As soon as possible.
Good, then we can leave. Bermuda, the world's biggest waterfall.
How about some music?
How about our young writers, right? Scholars, actors, terrific job, everyone. Terrific. Thank you all again for coming, and we absolutely insist that you come back at 3 o'clock for our Pearson House party today, where we celebrate our seniors, our graduates, and everyone who's done such hard work all year long. So thank you, and hope to see you soon.